Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Luke Sawelo, people lo Popondetta lo contribute lo this important debate on our 2023 budget. Now, before me, talk lo side blong budget where Treasury delivering lo this house. Me got just two point lo just where all opposition only making up lo talk. Tupla talk where me like just put him this la talk lo rest because no good is la talk too by some time. It can be manipulated and twisted by media for their benefit of selling the newspapers. So tupla something me talk lo here me talk sem this la rich black Christian nation this la narrative lo prime minister. When me talk sem it's an imaginary statement or an imaginary thought. I mean, when you look at it from when Prime Minister been narrating this talk, we are already a rich country, yes it is. We've got land, we have a culture, you know, and that statement is not necessarily implying on having money in our pockets. It's about building good health systems. It's about building a good educational system. It's about reinforcing our public structures, all policies, when something we put him in place. Lo Kevin or something we all by Bagarabim countries, so that those are statements that can be sometimes taken out of context. But me believe was some time Prime Minister he been making this narrative. It is basically on looking at it holistically to make Papua New Guinea rich, is so that we have great health, great education, good land, develop our land. These are all part and parcel of making our country a rich Christian black nation. So me just like put in this last so that all opposition understand him that that narrative is a comprehensive narrative which covers quite a lot of areas when you want to consider us as a rich nation. Now, something too, me talk of all businesses work law downside. This decision law, all businesses downside. These are business decisions, not government decisions. These are decisions made by business communities based on external environment that is affecting their businesses. You had COVID and post-COVID impact still having an impact on businesses. You've got the Russia and Ukraine war still affecting businesses today. The supply chain system, which Wampla leader me mentioned him, where you can't get a car now if you go down to Ella Motors. You have to wait for 6 months to 12 months simply because the supply system to provide that is all affecting business operations in the country. So when businesses are downsizing, they're trying to maximize their profits. So they are downsizing so that the business survives, and then when the economy recovers, the world recovers, then these businesses can expand again. So me just like clarifying this last so that opposition understand that not only is the government responsible for businesses, these are business decisions business make for the survival of the businesses. Now, something let me talk long side long banks complaining that the government has increased the tax from the large profit tax, which now we call it the corporate tax, from 30% to 45%. So when you look at it realistically, the initial amount that was imposed was about 190 million, if I'm correct, in this year's budget. Now, if you look at that 45% increase, it's about 235 million increase. That's about 45%, 45 million increase. But when you compare that little increase, now we have to understand that the money that we add onto the budget, this money goes to pay for things like now project fees, Mipla Rausim Lo Mama Papa. If we look at it closely, we're looking at about 160 million kina that we are now taking away from the parents. But we're just taking a little out of these businesses, which I believe they declared large profits in this last financial year only completed. So what we take out from businesses and we then apply it back into the budget, these are helping our simple rural people who have bank accounts with big institutions and they get tax for their account keeping fees and all that. These simple people don't complain. So when we put such things in the budget like this, businesses like making huge profits should not complain, because we are putting the money back into the communities to help our people at the end of the day who will still bank with them and banks still charge them bank keeping fees and etc. So, me like, because I'm just putting law context so that the opposition understands that the government is being responsible, but at the same time, we are not overdoing it. We are working it within a structure where I believe it complements all sectors of our communities. So, lo, this me like come back na talk big congratulations, come lo, our very hard-working treasurer. Lo budget and me put him together. And me like talk thank you, lo, Minister of Planning, Finance, Prime Minister, all the ministers that were part and parcel of this budget. But I also want to acknowledge the public servants that have worked tirelessly in the last few weeks behind the scenes to make sure that this budget gets presented to the House, and then we put a sensible, responsible budget for our people to be able to benefit from that in the next year. I've worked all my life in the private sector, and we have a general saying that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And if we don't put a budget in place, something that we can work off, then how are we going to change or move forward? So budget is a very important asset of anything, any business, even you may stop a house, and we work and we end a fortnight, we have to budget that. We budget what we spend. So government has to put a budget in place so that we plan and then we play executing this budget. Budget is consisting of how much money is coming in, where there's a shortfall. You like buying a house, the first thing the bank will ask you, what's your equity? You might talk me, I have X amount of kina. Then you borrow from them to buy the house. You non kisim kestasona go buy, you are required to have a income of some form in order for you to get a loan to be able to successfully acquire what you want to do. So the government being responsible is taking the same measure. We have a revenue income. We know where we are making money from. But as the country continues to grow, of course there's going to be demand. People want bridges, people want new hospitals, people want new schools, people want new universities, people want jobs. So we have to look for ways to be able to compensate for that demand that's coming. So if the revenue is insufficient, there's nothing wrong with borrowing. Borrowing is healthy as long as you can manage to repay the borrowing every year. That's a responsible way of approaching things. If we don't have the capacity to pay, then we should be attacking the government for borrowing. But we have the capacity to pay. And we are working within the means of that capacity, so that's why we are borrowing. So as a responsible government, I want to congratulate the treasurer because he has gone out, he's looked at everything with good advice, both within the private sector, within the public sector, within people who have sound knowledge of the economy, have given him good advice, now budget and come up. All of us are going to benefit at the end of the day. Plenty blow, you mean like Kai, but we are not ready to put the money back. You mean like Kai, but we are not ready to look for ways to make money for this country. Kai and Missy, but who said by planning Kai? And this is where the treasurer comes involved. It's not only looking at feeding you, but it's also looking at how to grow that garden to feed us. So thank you, treasurer. One time I'll walk line blow you. Now me like just contribute him all legally called something where me hamamas. I'm also happy on your money plan to look at assistant package blow household. You know, when you look at it, plenty old man, our rural communities, people who are low income earners, 65 kina may not be a lot to us, or 63 kina, a fortnight may not sound a lot. But to these simple people, that's an extra packet of rice, the extra tin meat, the extra lunch money for the children, it goes a long way. So when such a intervention comes by reducing now, increasing the threshold of people earning up to 20,000 now, housing tax, it's a good intervention by the government. But of course, opposition will always have a different opinion about this. Yeah. And that's their job to do that, and we accept it. Good plow, say, Molly Toko, say, Molly bless him. This la budget na. Me look goya. Meeting all Christian taso sidan upside na look tok bless him, this la budget. But it's good to see that they are Christians today. Hopefully they are Christians forever. I'm happy that the government is putting funding into law and order and one big plus something. I've been someone that's been speaking about it a lot too during government caucus meetings, and I think on a couple of occasions on the floor I talked about it as well, and I'm happy that the government is looking at that now. When we address law and order, our economy will grow. investors will come. People will feel that this is an environment to invest in. So when we address law and order, that's the way forward. Me like encourage him, our law enforcement agencies. Me plan understand him all challenges you go through. But now you play kiss him more money, put it to the right places. Invest it in the welfare of our policemen. Invest it in their homes. Let's build some good homes for them. Let's increase the manpower. Let's start putting back where it really matters. And I'm happy that the Minister for Internal Security is addressing that. That's the way to go. We address those basic issues. Once you have a policeman or policewoman that are happy, you will find that they will do their job a lot more better. Agriculture. We are putting in more money there, and I'm excited about it. You know, Papua New Guinea is 85% of our people are rural-based. So when you talk about agriculture, you are touching the heart of our people. When you touch the heart of our people and get our people actively involved in participating in growing the economy, there's no need for our people to come to the cities. Why? Because money and stuff will place. If you look at our land, we've got more land, but less people work in the land. Why? Because we are not investing into agriculture. But when you start investing into agriculture, people start realizing that there's money to be made there. So me believe Osem, when you look at agriculture as the way forward, that's the next economic boom. Gas will go away, gold will go away, oil will go away, but agriculture, and by stuff will get a time. So that's the next boom we must concentrate on. Let's not talk about LNG, let's not talk about gold, let's not talk about the non-renewable sector, but let's talk about the renewable sector. Agriculture is the way forward. So in order for us to export, there are some things, and I would like to encourage the good minister to look at this. Something you may talk long export, but a lot of countries, before they import from us, and before we can export to them, there are certain food requirements or security standards that we have to match. Like if we want to send stuff to Australia, there is a food security or biosecurity that must be put in place. We must build a facility to be able to justify for us to export. You may get all man ready to provide cash crops. But if we don't build facilities to be able to bring that to that standard where all this law country expect him, then we can keep talking about exporting, but we will never get it to them. So me like encourage him, look, build him all security, food security facilities so that we can start exporting to these countries. And not only when you do that, when you start looking at exporting our local produce, technically we are creating employment. Right now, we are putting young people out into the social space. But when we are putting them out, planting blow you me, put them all schools, put them all go outside, there's no future for these young people. So what we need to do is, not only do we have to build food security facilities, but let's look at also improving some of the institutions so that young people that are coming out of high schools and secondary schools, let's start pushing them into the technical schools, agriculture colleges. Let's start training and building our agriculture environment and space so that we can be able to not only export, but create a lot more employment for our people. There's another thing that I would like to encourage us to look at. When we start looking at exporting our cash crops, is that we need to also look at a container ship in, container ship out policy. So when we build these food facilities, we tie it into businesses. So for example, one business me importing products from China come lo yumi. And then that container sits as an empty container and gets shipped back as an empty container back to China. What we need to do now is that we need to tie that container so that when it leaves our shore back to China, let's fill it up with potatoes, let's fill it up with bananas, let's fill it up with carrots, whatever we can produce, coffee, cocoa, copra, whatever. Let's load them back in those containers and ship them back to China. That way, there's some kind of a chain of supply that's working in both directions. It's win-win situation for everybody. They bring in containers with their products into our country. We ship those containers back to their countries with our cash crops. So we must put in place a framework to be able to develop a policy that becomes a reality at the end of the day. Mr. Speaker, I'm just legally contribution belum ita sol na me like congratulate him government belum ini Prime Minister, one-time Treasurer. Me like talk thank you. Lo budget you put him on the back of the 2023 budget. Me like talk thank you for the implementation of the 2022 budget. I am one of the recipients of the DSIP as a member. I've been able to do a lot of things on the ground. Now by looking more say mipla who said come back. All people only honor mipla because lo work mipla make him. Sampla belum mipla, brothers belum mipla, leaders only no come back. And that's a good question we can ask, but I guarantee you, you check him accounts, plenty of Islam ministers or members of parliament, they didn't do work on the ground and they left a lot of money in their accounts as they exceeded. So we can't blame the government. The government has been giving DSIP to members to make sure that we deliver projects on the ground. So I look forward for these next 5 years, especially this 2023 budget. Thank you, Prime Minister, and all the leaders, and we look forward to working with you guys to make sure that this budget becomes a reality for every one of us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.